we have everyone coming in, I'll just start putting out a few admin items for everyone. First off, thanks for taking the time today to be a part of this open topic overview and AMA. If you've been on these before, we've usually done them on Fridays, but we've decided to move it to our normal Thursday webinar in order to respect your time and cut down the amount of meetings that we hold. We got a great panel that Helena will introduce here in just a second, but just a couple of quick admin items. Next week, the webinar is going to be focused on our AFVentures year in review. It's going to be a 2-hour block, and Jason Ratchey will be going over everything that's happened in 2021 with the program, and also look into the future for 2022. So look forward to that one next week. You'll be seeing some social media posts coming out about that as well too. And that'll also be my last time hosting as well. And with that, we got Helena now, luckily as part of the AFVentures team. And going forward after next week, she will be taking over the webinars. So with that, Helena, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Really glad to be here and to be a part of this awesome team and to be talking with all of you here today. So with that, I will get started. Again, my name is Helena Krusek. I'm our new Deputy Engagements Lead for AFVentures. We have a really exciting topic today, as you might have seen in your inboxes for those of you that are subscribed to DSIP and AF SIB Sitter. We are in pre-release for 22.1 direct to phase 2. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today with some of the AFVentures team, give you the opportunity to ask the questions that you need and hopefully give you the best opportunity to submit an application and get your foot in the door. Next slide, please. All right, before we do that, here are the basic rules of engagement. For anyone who wants to be on camera and is okay with that, this call is being recorded so that we can have this up for posterity later. We will not be covering any classified or proprietary information, so please don't volunteer yours if you don't want it put on YouTube. You are encouraged to post any questions that you have in the Q&A portion. There's also a chat on the right side of the Zoom screen. Please use that, put your questions in there and engage with the community. We're going to do our best to answer questions live, but sometimes it's easier for technical folks to get in and directly respond to your questions in there. So if you're not getting a question answered, please put it in there and we'll be sure to try to follow up with you and get you some good direction. Additionally, PMs, please raise your hand so we can push you to panelist. We've got a really great team operating on the back end, but let's make everyone's lives easier by following decorum and raising our hands, taking it back to elementary school. Next slide, please. With us today, we have the POCs who are in charge of our acquisitions and investment team. Today, we're going to have the early stage investment lead for evaluation, Jared Evans. Our phase 2 operations, transition and execution lead. Ray Khan is actually on leave currently, but Adam Sheridan from the team is the deputy. He will be online. We also plan to show off the solicitation officers. I believe Christina Croak is not here, but James Helmick, I think you are online. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And then again, myself and Jimmy from the AFVentures engagements team here to tell you more about how to get involved with AFVentures, where to plug in, and the best times to do that. Next slide, please. Also wanted to raise to your attention that new website that we have that has all of the external information, hopefully in a much easier to digest way to understand what we're working on. We still have the AFWERX.mil page up, but we're going to be working on pushing everything here and making it a lot more digestible, accessible, and easier to understand from a fund perspective. So just know that everything is going to be living on this website. Bookmark it if you haven't already. Once we get to the end of the conversation, we'll talk a little bit about events in the future, but you can register for all of our upcoming events through the end of the year and next year going through this portal. With that, I will hand it off to Jared Evans to tell you a little bit about the upcoming cycle. Jared, over to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Helena. And it's wonderful to have you on the team. You know, we have we have really enjoyed having you so far, and the other team members as we continue to grow as an AFWERX organization, as AFVentures organization, and this is a particularly exciting time, right? Introducing a new topic, getting started with a new cycle is particularly interesting, not only from a program perspective, right? Introducing the next iteration of our program, of our process, of our curriculum, but also it's a great time to get on board with the folks on the line here, distribute important information to everyone, and get this next cycle started. So with that, we'll jump into the next slide here, and we'll hold. We'll go through these three, and then we'll hold on the next. So we'll talk a lot about AFVentures. We talk about Siver and Sitter, right? But when we talk about why the open topic and why this is the thing, we want to hit these on the next few slides. You know, as you can read here, our perspective as AFVentures is that there is a massive opportunity space in the small business market across the United States, right? And a lot of those, if you know, statistically speaking, haven't explored how they can work with the Air Force, how they can work with the Department of Defense and the federal government, right? And so we want to make ourselves more approachable. We want to make our program more effective, and our Air Force and our defense, you know, national security apparatus more effective, right? By working with these small businesses. So we'll go to the next slide. In order for us to be more approachable and to make this more effective, we have to think a little bit differently, right, than we have historically as a Department of Defense or even as a program team. And so lowering the barriers to entry, thinking about how we're being an effective partner for the small business community and for the national security community are central to that. And we'll go to the next slide. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the whole point of these programs are to really complete due diligence in effect, so that at the end of the day, we have a capability space and a stable of really incredible companies, incredible capabilities that we're bringing to the federal government space, that we're bringing to the Air Force space. And I say Air Force, that's the Department of the Air Force. You know, you can kind of read the slide here and exactly how we do that. But at the end of the day, the open topic does not wait for us, the government, to ask for you or to know everything about what exactly that you guys can provide as small businesses, and the capabilities that we could take advantage of in working with you directly. And so this open topic is an opportunity to be a front door that you can come into the process. You can come into our community, jump on and receive a government contract, and start implementing your solutions with our warfighters, with our national security community, and it's, you know, bring capability to our community that we otherwise wouldn't have. So we move to the next slide here. We'll talk about how we're doing that this cycle specifically, right? So one of the hot topics of the last 24 hours are folks realizing that for this cycle, for this 22.1, we are not offering a phase 1 option. This is all direct to phase 2. And there's a few reasons that we're doing that I'll highlight. The first of which is an acknowledgement that there is a large logistical chain on the back side of these processes. So these, you know, whether it be aligning augmentees for the technical evaluations, whether it be for the other due diligence activities, whether it be for actually putting these contracts on award, right? We are thinking of you principally, the small businesses, and managing your experience. So we know that we have a phase 2 sprint coming up, and we are aligning our offerings to make sure that you are having the experience that you need to have, and we're being responsive to timelines, and offering you a quick suspension of submission, to contract award timeline. So we do not want to put out offerings where you're going to have to wait 3, 4, 6 months we want to make sure that we're being responsive to you in your submissions to keep things moving along. What this does not mean is that we're not offering phase ones in the future. This does not mean that you necessarily will have to wait until much later in the year to kind of get into the pipeline. We're specifically going to talk about 22.1 in this opportunity here. So one thing I'll note too here up front, for the eagle eye folks on the line may notice that it's 1.25 million per award, as opposed to our traditional 750K. So we are upping the phase 2 program maximum. Well, so for those who are familiar with the program, 1.25 million in program funds, but there are opportunities for you to bring additional funds to the table, whether that's from government customers or from commercial or private investment communities, non-government entities as well. So that additional funds can add to that 1.25, but maximum of 1.25 million of program of SBIR funding per award. All right. So we'll go into the next slide here. So again, this is the topic number. For those who aren't familiar, this kind of VIN number looking thing at the top, AF22.1 DCSO1, and that's a letter O, an Oscar, as opposed to a 0, just for search purposes when you're on the website. When you go to the SBIR and SIDR websites, you're going to see a lot of topic numbers like this, right? And so what we want to highlight is that what we're going to talk about today is specifically the Air Force open topic direct to phase 2. And that is this 22.1 DCSO1 topic. So when you go on the website, you're going to see lots of different things from lots of different services. There's a lot of great offerings out there. But what we're talking about specifically today is this topic. Okay. We'll get to the next slide. All right. So direct to phase 2, what is it? Right? Why is it a thing? And how is it, really significantly different from the phase 1s? So phase 1 is the traditional pathway to work through this SBIR and STTR processes, right? You go through and you do a feasibility study in phase 1. In phase 2, you establish a prototype and allow your sponsors to start realizing value in terms of the prototypes that you're providing over the term of your work plan. And then in phase 3, right, transition, you get to a point where those customers are actually buying this product or solution or what have you from you, right, or further developing as appropriate. What this direct to phase 2 is the express lane in sort, right? So one, it's specific to the SBIR program. So there's not an STTR direct to phase 2, only SBIR. And what this allows you to do is establish feasibility on your terms, and then translate that into a phase 2 contract, right? So what you're going to see here is a quote directly from the solicitation, and there's the citation there at the bottom. But all of this is important, right? I'm not going to read every word on the slide because it's a paragraph. I'll let you do that. But every single piece of this is important as it pertains to the direct to phase 2. A couple highlights, right? This first sentence, offerers, must adequately document completion of the phase 1 feasibility requirement, right? You have to establish that your product can feasibly transition into the Air Force, specifically the Air Force ecosystem, right? And help solve Air Force problems, if you want to think about it that way. We'll talk about some of the requirements later on in the presentation, right? But for those who are familiar, I'll kind of give you some of the high points, right? A signed customer memorandum that is signed by Air Force organizations that said, yes, this is important to my operations. This can positively impact me, my people, and my mission, right? And then there's additional kind of paperwork that comes along with that says, hey, we've established that this is feasible to transition. And then also here's a plan of how we're going to actually do that. I'll also fast forward to the last sentence in the paragraph or in the slide here, which is the feasibility documentation must not be solely based on work performed under prior or ongoing SBIR or STTR work, right? So we get a lot of questions in terms of, well, can I go from a phase 1 to a direct to phase 2? And in strictly speaking, in chronological order, you can do that. But as you can see here, your feasibility documentation cannot be solely based on that, right? You have to, the point of a direct to phase 2 is to allow you to do this on your own dime and on your own timeline, and then come to us at the appropriate time with this direct to phase 2 offering, right? And jump into the pipeline at an advanced point in the process, right? So with that comes a higher bar, right? So these are not phase 1s. You have to come in with an established customer and end user, and an established feasibility of transition, right? And a plan on how to get there, right? So not only have you have to establish feasibility, but also the plan moving forward to actually get to that point of transition. Okay. Now, following these direct to phase 2 contracts, right? These are phase 2 contracts we're talking about, right? You'll be eligible for our TACFI and StratFi programs. We're not going to talk about those very much here in this presentation, but I want you to know that that's kind of a natural follow-on, provided success not only in receiving the phase 2, but also during the phase 2 program itself. Okay. So we'll go to the next slide here. All right. So in terms of proposal structure, for those who have gone through this process or have seen this, it's going to look very similar, right? This is the kind of the standard DSIP proposal structure, DSIP being the Defense Submission Innovation System, something like that. And that's where the portal where you're actually going to put in your proposal and submit it via DSIP. So if you're not familiar with that, you can search it online. You can look at our resources on our website and see links there. But that's where you're actually submit that information. So volume 1, basic information, whether that be your small business registration numbers. So in SAM and in DUNS, if you have a cage number, you'll submit your abstract, contact information, all that kind of basic stuff. Volume 2 is the technical volume, right? So this is the core of what a lot of people think of as the proposal, right? For phase 2s, this is a 15-page, maximum of 15-page white paper that addresses the required items in that order that they're presented in the solicitation. So we don't outline them here. All of that is detailed in the actual solicitation. And that solicitation is the authoritative source of information. So regardless of, as an aside, if you hear things here on AMAs that seem to go against what you read in the solicitation, 1, please let us know. We can certainly help clarify with the appropriate folks. And 2, always believe the solicitation, right? The solicitation is the authoritative source of information. So we just want to put that out there, that if you think there's a conflict, let us know and we can help clarify. But in the meantime, always err towards the solicitation itself. Okay. For volume 2, this is the cost volume, right? These are system formatted inputs where you're going to talk about the costs associated with your proposal. Volume 4 is the commercialization program. It's fairly simple in terms of process. There's a website listed in the solicitation on pages 29 and 30. There's a pretty simple process in going about that and having that system input included in your proposal. In volume 5, supporting documentation. So as you can see, this is really important. There's a lot of things in here that are must-haves, right? So you can see category A, required. The signed customer memorandum that we talked about, the cover sheet supplemental cost information, resumes of key personnel, a non-proprietary work plan that is included in your proposal here. Funding agreement certification, life cycle certifications. You have the ESO requirement or the questionnaire there. And then your contractor certification regarding provision of prohibited video surveillance and telecommunications services and equipment, which these are all kind of statutory things that we have to check. So make sure you include those. If you don't include these, we're going to attempt to work with you to the maximum extent possible, but that doesn't always mean that we're able to ask you about it later, right? In most cases, to be honest, we have to, and we'll go through this a little bit later on as well, but these are required to be part of your proposal. So make sure that you check off each one of these items before you hit the finalize button in DSIP there. There's also a few things that are as applicable that you can read through there, whether that be letters of support, additional funding information, right? So the cost volume in volume 3 is a system formatted input. Some things it calculates for you, right? If you would like to submit kind of your own format or budget and cost information, you certainly can in volume 5 there, and that's useful. And then also in the case of foreign ownership or control, there's a disclosure associated with that. And then at the very end of volume 6, fraud, waste, and abuse training, that's a standard part of the proposal as well. Okay, very good. So we'll go to the next section here. We've talked about the proposal structure as a whole, and now we're going to talk about how it's actually evaluated, which is really important, right? There are only 3 things that are qualitative in our evaluation, right? And it's these 3 evaluation criteria. These are the 3 things that you need to keep in your head as you're developing your proposal, right? This is what you're going to be judged on. There's a lot of eligibility things that are kind of check boxes to make sure that we have in place, right? Those aren't points of judgment necessarily, right? These criteria are where we bring in evaluators from across the Air Force to speak about each one of these individually, right? So these need to be interwoven all the way through your proposal, right? Don't be afraid to speak very overtly, right, about how your proposal and your solution accomplishes these things. There's not a secret language, right? There's not kind of special terminology you need to use. You need to talk to this as directly as possible, right? So keep that in mind as you're developing that proposal. So criteria A, potential for government or private sector commercialization and the benefits expected to accrue from that commercialization, right? You can see some of the things that we kind of put forward and try to help you think about what's important here and how we think about things. But this is really important, right? The potential for government and private sector commercialization. It's not one or the other. It's something that we want to make sure that we're not the only ones who care about what you're doing, right? Showing that there's a community of people who are interested in this market, who are interested in your approach, and represent opportunities for this to commercialize and become a thing, if you will, later on in the process. So criteria B, the appropriateness, relevance, and specificity of a identified defense need, right? At the end of the day, we're using Air Force money to pay for these programs, specifically the Air Force open topic, obviously. So we need to be solving Air Force problems, right? So you'll hear me say Air Force, that is Department of the Air Force. So we're talking not only the United States Air Force, but the United States Space Force as well. The Customer Memorandum helps speak to that, right? It kind of establishes a foundation for this conversation. And that's the minimum requirement. But again, we want to make sure that there's not just one person who cares about this. There are communities of people who care about with your solution, how you're going about it, and the problem that you're trying to solve, if you will. C is the technical approach, right? So we get that there's a market for this, government and or private sector, that we as an Air Force care about this and want this to happen. And we need to make sure that this can happen, right? From a technical perspective, that the approach is well thought out. And this includes kind of very strictly speaking, the technical development. This includes integration, not only in terms of your customer's application, but also their environment as a whole, right? So if there's other systems that needs to touch in some way, shape, or form, if there's regulatory processes that need to be accomplished prior to this getting to a point of being useful, if you will, right? If there's a test and evaluation plan that needs to kind of come to light and be executed as part of that development effort, right? There's many different aspects of this technical approach that is summarized here in the soundness, the technical merit, and innovation of the proposed technical approach, as well as its differentiation from current customer alternatives and incremental progress towards fulfilling the identified defense need. There's a few things in here that's really important, right? Soundness, technical merit, innovation of the proposed technical approach. I think those generally, speak for themselves. Differentiation from the current customer alternatives. That's really important. That's part of understanding your market. That's part of, particularly on the defense side. Folks in the commercial market don't always necessarily understand fully the environment that these defense users are in, right? It is not a typical commercial environment. There's a lot more rules. There's a lot more, kind of regulatory barriers in some cases to maintain security and so on in the DoD. And so understanding that and planning for it is a really important part of this program. And then incremental progress towards fulfilling the defense need. Right? It doesn't have to be a perfect solution necessarily, right? It doesn't have to be the gold-plated, enterprise-level, 100% solution up front. We need to be able to get there, right? That's the ideal case. But we understand that things can take time. And so what you may propose maybe isn't a 100% solution. But the most important part of that is you understanding it's not a 100% solution and having a roadmap to get there. Right. So that's again, that starts with understanding your environment and how you're going to integrate and meet those requirements from your defense customers. And it also includes that the fact that particularly in talking about differentiation in customer alternatives, is that things don't have to be the bleeding edge of science all the time. Right. We don't have to be, this is fresh off the press from the world's greatest PhD. Right, straight from the lab. We care that it's better than what our folks have in terms of options right now. And so that's what we're comparing it to. So something to keep in mind as you're going through this process is that this direct to phase 2 particularly has historically been our strictest, right, our most selective offering that we have. And one of the reasons why we're really focusing on this is to allow more folks in this process through this particular gate, and to do it with a refined customer experience, which we're really focused on. Okay, all right. So we'll go to the next slide here. Okay, so what's next? We talked about kind of what a proposal generally includes. Excuse me. We'll talk about like how we evaluate those proposals. And here's some more additional information moving forward on how to better understand what we're asking for. Not only do we have the AMA today, obviously, we have AMA number 2 and number 3 scheduled for the dates right there. So 16 December and 13 January. I don't know, team, do we know if those are all at noon? Is that, or have those been scheduled?
Jared, those should be the same time as this one. That's the recurring time slot.
Perfect. Okay, so you can anticipate those being at noon Eastern, just like they are today. And you can register there at that website. Maybe we have a chance to throw that in the chat or what have you. Ultimately, the proposal window opens on the 12th. So it happens to be a Wednesday. And then they're due on Thursday, 10 February at noon Eastern. And again, that's through DSIP. So Defense Submission Innovation Portal, I think is what DSIP stands for. A couple puts that we always have here. One, please don't wait to the last minute. The first opportunity you have to jump in there and start putting things together, the better. Human nature tends to push us to waiting to the last minute. And then when everybody waits to the last minute, it overwhelms the system and weird things happen. So please help us help you in getting those submissions in early and kind of thinking through some of these items that we talked about. All right. I think from this point, we're going to talk into some of the details of the proposals. There we go. So some non-negotiables, right? A lot of questions we get are, okay, well, what does an ideal solution look like? Or what does an ideal proposal look like? Well, first of all, we're going to start with the basics. Please read the solicitation, right? That's kind of step one. You can help yourself out a lot just by doing that alone. As you'll notice in the documentation, all offers, in order to be eligible, must be qualifying and registered small businesses. So that means you need to be registered in SAM, you have a DUNS number, etc. Okay. When you register in SAM, I believe, is when you need to make sure that you're signed up not only just for grants, but for all contracts. So there's a distinction there. That there's always a couple every cycle of proposals that we love, but they're not able to be awarded because they're not registered correctly in the system. So please help us there by confirming that is the case. This solicitation is for this phase 2 only. Maximum contract terms are 1.25 of program funds, 1.25 million, and a 21-month period of performance. So if you come to us and say, hey, here's a proposal for 1.5 million, and you're not bringing any additional funding to the table, right? That's going to be, that proposal is then what we call non-responsive to the solicitation, right? It's not going to be able to be evaluated or awarded, regardless of how great the proposal actually is. Similarly, if you come in and propose a 24-month period of performance, we're not going to be able to evaluate or award that proposal. So please help us scope these proposals to the offering here. You have to submit via DSEP. We're not able to pre-read or recommend or QC proposals. And we're not able to receive proposals via email or any other method. So every so often we'll get requests to DoD safe a proposal and send it over that system. That's not something that we have an opportunity to do, right? Everything comes through DSEP. Something that we always tend to hit on as well is that these offerings must be research, development, test, and evaluation activities, right? We're not procuring services. We're not procuring hardware or software. And those are proper terms in the acquisition community, right? Procurement and services. We are developing things that don't currently exist, whether that be we're taking a mature commercial product and we're doing development activity to make it appropriate for the defense acquisition community. Maybe we're building something from the ground up, whatever is the case for you. But you need to be very, very specific about how this is research, development, test, and evaluation. We can talk more about that if that would be useful. But please do note that that's really important, right? We're not going to be able to award because these are all RDT&E funded activities, and we're not able to use money for anything other than those activities, which is really important. Fraud, waste, and abuse training, that's a no kidding requirement. And again, if we're not checking some of the basic boxes here, we won't get to a point of being able to evaluate or much less award those. So please note that moving forward. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Good deal. All right, so we have reached the end of my soliloquy here. If you guys have questions, please throw them in the Q&A. I'm sure that you guys have been doing that the whole time, and I know our team have been attacking those in the most benevolent way possible. If there's any themes or things we can jump on, we certainly will. But I'll hand it back over to Helena to help direct traffic.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Jared. And that's a super helpful presentation. So thank you for going over all of that. Like Jared said, we've got a whole lot of questions, and I'm going to do my best to try to group these because there's some similar trends. Also, please note that if your question does not get answered, some of them have been typed out under the answered tab. So go check it out there, or let me know if the specific answer you were looking for was not answered. So first question that's sort of a general theme that we're seeing here is that people are interested to know when they're not selected, what's the best way for folks to get feedback? It sounds like people have had some frustration with that in the past, and they want to know if they're not selected, the reasons why, so they can, I'm assuming, reshuffle and prepare and do better next time. Any words of advice there?
Yeah, no, fantastic. So there is an official pathway for feedback particularly for these phase twos, right? So phase one feedback has been historically really limited. One of the things that we're focusing on currently, and this is important for the larger crowd to understand, is that one of the things we are really focused on is providing feedback, right? And that's not traditionally where it's always been historically scoped. And what I mean by that is feedback typically means feedback on the proposals. And that's true. That's an aspect of feedback that we're trying to develop. We're also trying to develop a robust and consistent feedback or means of feedback throughout the process. So not only just your proposal, but also as you come in, you go through the, if you were in a phase one, you're getting feedback through that process. You get into phase two, we're establishing feedback loops in phase two, and then on into TACFI and StratFi as well. So please do know we are growing the apparatus for feedback across the board, to include proposals, to include during the actual program itself. So when it comes to feedback for proposals specifically, when you get a notification letter, it will talk about whether it's select or not select, it will talk about a feedback mechanism that you can follow to receive official feedback on that proposal specifically. And also, if James is on the line, James, is there any input or update you want to throw out in regards to feedback specifically?
Sorry, struggling with the mute button. So there is 2 pathways to request official feedback. It is typically listed in the solicitation. There's a section on feedback, and it'll tell you the formal way to go in and request it. There's another way in the actual the Air Force Silver Sitter tool that you can go in, and when you get your notice of non-select, you can go in there and hit the request feedback button, and that will add you to a list of requesters that we have on our side that we are slowly working through to get through. Now, mind you, because of the popularity of this program, we do have a number of those outstanding, and we are working our way through and getting those addressed as quickly as we can. And then, as Jared was saying, we're also working on some other better mechanisms in the future to be providing more direct and also faster feedback to across the board. So,
absolutely, no, that's awesome. Thanks, James.
Great. All right. So in that same vein, we have some folks who are explicitly asking about the last cycle. So one of the 20 cycles.
Okay.
For those who haven't received responses yet, do you have any recommendations for who they can reach out to in terms of getting a response, especially if they're not getting anything? And then follow-up question is, can they resupply or not resupply? Wow. Can they reapply for the next cycle?
No, that's great question. So ultimately, for folks who have gone through the process and they haven't received feedback or notifications of where they are, one, your contract will have not only contracting officers but also program managers that you can reach out to. Maybe it could be me, it could be Zoe, or what have you. For some of the cohorts that were spread out over a large period of time, so 20.D is a great example of this. I think the contracts were awarded over the course of like 8 months to a year, it seems. In any case, some of those proposals, or excuse me, some of those phase one contracts that were completed earlier in the year went through a summer cycle of evaluation and contract award. And then we have a second tranche of contracts who were phase one contracts who finished later, all the way up till just a few weeks ago, who are going through the evaluation process now, and we'll get notifications here at the end of the year or in January. So depending on their particular situation, the timing may be a little different, but ultimately there are a number of different ways to reach out to the team. And I don't know if there's a broader inbox, SBIR or otherwise, that we want to highlight as another belly button or place to go. But we want to make sure that everybody has information, not only on your cohort and on your specific effort, but also on kind of the broader schedule for the AFWERX topics in particular.
Great. And if we do end up having that, could one of the team members in the background put that into the chat so folks can see the actual designated address if we do have it, just for reaching back out? That would be helpful. Next question on here is in regards to funding amounts. So in terms of that D2P2, that topic, the total funding amount adds up to 1.5 million. But it looks like there is some conflicting information out there about how they decide what max award amount there is. It definitely changes from award cycle to award cycle, but can you speak to that a little bit more about, what that number is and how and when or why that might change?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. So I think this is a great place for James to chime in as well. But one thing I'll note is that what we're talking about here in this presentation is specifically, again, that AFWERX open topic directive phase 2. That is one topic out of a number of topics that the Air Force is offering. So the award amounts is going to change based on which topic you're talking about. So for the directive phase 2, it is 1.25 of program funds. Again, if you bring additional funding from other places, we can add to that, right? As described in the solicitation itself. But that's what we're anticipating for this particular directive phase 2 topic. James, any additional information you'd like to jump in there?
Yeah, so I think some of the confusion I see about this often comes up because so there are actually 2 documents that are currently posted on DSIP. So there is what we're talking about here, which is the 22-1 Commercial Solutions opening. And then there's also the DoD Broad Agency Announcement, which is the BAA. So the Broad Agency Announcement also includes, I think it's 65 or more topics they're called specific topics for across the different AFRL technical directorates, and there are a lot of their own requirements. So those documents should be considered to be standalone. So all of the information needed from the Commercial Solutions opening would be found in the Commercial Solutions opening, and all the information for the Broad Agency Announcement would be found in the Broad Agency Announcement. So those two don't coexist and don't live together. That's actually why they're posted up there separately, because they are to be treated as separate items.
Awesome. On that similar vein, that brings up a good point that we sort of talked around, but I want to make sure that it gets hit on because I think some people have questions about this. So because this cycle is D2P2 only, what does that mean for folks who are interested in phase 1? And what are those other more direct applications that people can apply to? How do people understand those, and what should they do to try to find them?
No, it's a wonderful question. So right now, for this 22.1 cycle specifically, we are not offering an open topic phase 1 opportunity. So there are all other phase 1 opportunities through specific topics. Certainly there's going to be scoped to the specifics of those sponsors and the problem statements they're looking to address. But we do expect phase 1 opportunities to come through the open topic in the coming months. So we're not out of that game, or this isn't something that will be always the case, right? We are offering this focused opportunity with the directive phase 2 for a few specific reasons. Again, principally to manage that customer expectation through all the government processes that we have to go through. But we do anticipate phase 1's here to be forthcoming in the coming months. So if you're looking for an open topic phase 1, don't worry, it is on its way, and it's just a matter of making sure that we are poised to be responsive to those proposals when they come due here in just a little while. And as an aside, there is an open STTR phase 1 open topic through Space Force. So don't forget that is out there as well. I don't have the close date on that offhand. I don't know if the panelists know that off the top of their head, but point is, it is out there and available for you as well.
Yeah, great shout out there as well. And I know I'm not seeing that it was explicitly asked, but this is another thing that I think I've just absorbed from doing this, in the past month of being here, is that sometimes actually those direct applications make a lot more sense because RDT&E is a real component of the application. And if you're not doing something truly innovative, if you're not making something that's totally brand new, it can be difficult to award funding under that qualification. So sometimes those other awards can be an easier way to get plugged in because they're looking for exactly that thing. So just another word of advice as you're going through and looking through those solicitations, keep those opportunities in mind, because there are different colors of money and different types of contracts that people are looking for. No, it's just I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay. All right. So next question, thinking about pitch days. There is a specific question about whether or not we're thinking of doing an advanced manufacturing sustainment pitch day for fiscal year 2022. But my question, I just want to sort of re-ask is, what are the pitch days that we anticipate having coming up? And is there anything that we can speak to as to how we decide to do those?
Sure. So the pitch days are ultimately submitted and approved by our defense community, right? So we have sponsors who come to the Air Force Super Sitter program and say, hey, I really want to do a pitch day on X, right? Traditionally, they have not been recurring. So what you may have one year is not going to be the same set of pitch days that you'll have the coming year. I'm not aware of a pitch day for particularly advanced manufacturing this next year. But that doesn't preclude it from happening. So just because it hasn't been asked for, or that I personally don't know about it coming up, does not mean that it won't happen. So there's just some insight. Those are typically where sponsors come to the program and say, hey, I really want to do a pitch day for these reasons, on this time schedule in this way. All right. They propose that, it is approved through the process, and then they go and execute that. And so as such, those tend to be one-offs, but that doesn't preclude it from being a series, if you will, on an annual basis or what have you.
And to tag on to what you said, also real quickly, folks should look into Spark as well, because I believe that that's going to be the organization under the AFWERX umbrella that handles more of those pitch days and actual use cases that that airmen, servicemen, and women are seeing in their day-to-day. So just a quick shout out to check that out on the AFWERX website as well. All right, next question is about selected, not funded. It appears as though people saw a lot of that multiple times last year. And I think this question is really getting to whether or not we foresee that happening again in future cycles. And just speaking a little bit more to our budget and how we just decide to allocate funding based on that.
Yeah, those are fantastic questions. So selected, not funded means that we ran out of allocated funds before we ran out of good ideas, right? And so from a government or program perspective, we want to maintain some flexibility and say, hey, if we're able to secure funding, get more from Congress, or fallout funding comes later in the year, that we maintain an opportunity to award this later on. Unfortunately, that category has historically come with a lot of confusion, right? And do I wait for it? Do I not wait for it? Is it something that will happen, or is it just like a kind of pipe dream? And so we've seen a lot of unfortunate confusion that has induced. So largely speaking, we have nixed the selected, not funded category, and we have just gone either selected or non-selected, right, to kind of keep things clean and concise. There are niche cases last year where we had a select, not funded to help bridge this tranche 1 and tranche 2 for 20.D, for instance, where we had two different sprints we were holding on. And we wanted to allow some of the tranche 1 companies to be awarded in tranche 2 if the circumstances allowed. So that was a niche case where we did have the selected, not funded category being used. But I don't anticipate having a selected, not funded category this time, just because it did introduce a lot of confusion. I know our team has gone through a number of products and is working through products even now to help clarify some of that confusion. But to be honest, it was a good thing, not only in terms of us having more good ideas than money. That's always a positive problem to have, and it's easier to solve that than the other. Versus, and it's also a positive thing in terms of maintaining some flexibility and allowing us to contract or to award efforts later on that we weren't able to initially. So there's some flexibility built into that, but I understand it's caused some confusion. So we have tried to be a little bit more clean and concise in our evaluation or selection categories moving forward.
Hey, Jared, just one thing to piggyback on that with too. So in terms of on the engagement side of the house, we are as Jared mentioned, creating some products based around that, just based on the feedback we've got. So a selected not funded one pager will be coming out shortly. So be looking for that. It's just making its final rounds through our process, but that should help provide some good information on that for you guys.
That's great.
Great teaser, Jimmy. Thank you for that. I'm going to jump now to a little bit more technical question. Tina wants to know, does it still stand that as long as we have a DAF TPOC, we could still have a Navy, Army, Marine Corps customer and end user, or do they all need to be Air Force?
Yeah, so the ideal case, and we'll talk through some of the specifics here because they're important. These need to be solving Air Force problems, right? And these are Air Force funds that we're using. So we have to, the more we can highlight the needs of the Air Force specifically, the cleaner the case is going to be. There are cases where maybe you have an Air Force problem that's being realized in a joint organization where the commander of this joint organization maybe is Army or Navy or what have you, but is represented by their Air Force member inside of their organization. You know, that would be a case where, okay, I think we can make this work. It is solving an Air Force problem. The more gray that we get, the more discussion that has to be had, and it makes it more difficult from a program perspective to justify. So I think in terms of the TPOC versus the signatories, if there's an opportunity at all to have all Air Force, that makes things a lot cleaner, frankly. And our challenge to companies historically has been, hey, show us something that we're not interested in, right? Every single one of those Navy or other service POCs are going to have corollaries in the Air Force, right? And so we want to get to a point where we're highlighting those folks in these proposals. James, is there any additional detail you want to put in from a solicitation officer standpoint when it comes to the customer memorandum and the signatories and TPOCs there?
No, this is one of those that I'm going to just punt and say to make sure you read the solicitation very, very closely, as they do tend to change. And then I would also kind of reiterate what Jared said, is that you can always have more and different other letters of support, which is also described in this solicitation, but just as long as the minimums of the MOUs are met, that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, one detail is that when you read in the solicitation itself, a lot of in the past, we've actually had the customer memorandum be attached to the bottom of the document. In this particular case, it's actually linked. So you can find the customer memorandum template on the Air Force Super Sitter website. It's linked in the solicitation, so you can certainly find it there. But it's something a little different for this particular solicitation. Same, everything, all the processes are the same. It's just a matter of where it's listed.
All right, we're getting short on time here, but I've got a couple of good questions that I'm hoping will sum up some of the things we've seen. Question here: if you are awarded a direct to phase 2, can the funds be used towards platform 1 to help achieve ATO?
Yeah, great question. So ultimately, right, the ATO is an example of a regulatory process where we are trying to adjust or substantially modify a system from a commercial offering, or at least develop it into the point where it would be useful in the defense community, right? The fact that we're using, I don't know if the viewers can see this, but there's this is a Zoom Gov version of Zoom, right? Product that we're using. And so, it goes through FedRAMP certifications, and it has, all the special emblems and processes associated with it to be useful for the defense community, right? So whether it's flight testing or whether it's getting an ATO, you're going to be subject to those things as you go through your tech development pipeline. And so the costs associated with those things, can be part of that RDT&E, cost volume and RDT&E program. You just want to highlight the steps that you're going through, whether that be the test and evaluation, whether it be the kind of the regulatory side of the house, like actions that are specific to that. So that's all part of RDT&E. And so the clearer you can kind of walk through that and talk about how that process is important and how those activities support that process, you can kind of help us understand your perspective in that area.
All right. What about classified submissions? Is that something that qualifies under this open topic?
No, so these are all unclassified submissions, right? So DSIP and the Sitter program writ large are all unclassified. any movement to what we call the high side, right, to the classified realm is going to be instigated by your customers, right? So in every case, your customer is going to have to be working with you to make sure that you're qualified to do that classified work, right? You have all the appropriate check marks and qualifications, certifications, whatever it may be, in order to work that, and then they're going to sponsor you, right, in those appropriate processes to work in the appropriate space. Now, again, for our proposals and for this front door, you're going to need to be all unclassified, right? And you can work with those customers, with your customers and end users to make sure that you're doing that, right? They're not gonna be able to write your proposal for you, but we can talk about how you can communicate their needs and their involvement in an unclassified way. But ultimately, at the end of the day, again, these are all unclassified efforts. Over.
What about, this is a two-part question. Okay, talking more about MOUs, which has been a common theme, and this is, again, one of the non-negotiables. So mentioned on there is an end user and a customer. How many signatures, like unique signatures, are required on the MOUs this time?
Yeah, so those templates are up on the website, and they outline this. Long story short is you're going to have 2 signatures. 2 signatures.
Even if it's the same person, correct?
Yep. We need 2 signatures, right? And we do that. It seems like a kind of a weird admin thing for the same person to sign twice, if that is appropriate, right? So that's an important caveat. If that person is the customer and the end user, that's great. But the point here that we're driving home is making sure that these folks understand that they're filling both roles, and those roles come with responsibilities and things. So we want to make sure that they understand that, right? So that they're a good partner for you as a small business, and that they understand their role in the program and their role in your technology development, and what we expect from a program standpoint, them to step in and provide through the program itself.
Good, great. We got 2 minutes here, so we're going to go rapid fire, see if we can go fast here. Regarding the actual MOU template online, it was recently downloaded and it says 750K on there. Should they still use that same template and assume the milestones are for 1.25?
Yeah, so I would adjust that in this particular case, that template to reflect the program offering here. James, do you have any other input you want to make sure that it's pass along here?
No, I'll make a note of it, and I'll make sure that the kind of the point of us posting it up in the first place was to get out of the business of version control a little bit with chasing down as to which one was going where. So I will take a look at it right now and make sure that what we have up there is going to match up with what we're looking for.
There you go.
All right. I'm trying to go through the questions to see what else is not fit into this so far. Just as a quick heads up to everyone, if your question did not get answered or you did not get the specific answer that you want, definitely please reach back out to us. It is difficult to answer submission specific questions for your explicit proposal in this format. So just know that we'll do our best to answer your questions, and anything that is not answered here today will be posted up onto the website. So please, don't be discouraged if your question was not answered here today. With that, I will do one last question. I think we have 1 minute. Okay, in terms of the technical volume, should that include pitch deck, or is that some sort of additional documentation?
No, so we use pitch decks for phase 1s. We use white papers for phase 2s. It's a chance for you to fit in more information, frankly. in text and graphics and so on and so forth. So white paper is where it's at for this phase 2. You can submit a pitch deck if you want in the supplemental documents, as an add-on with all the pretty pictures. But the baseline requirement is for the white paper.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Jared, team AFVentures, team AFWERX. We are officially out of time. But again, for anyone that does have questions, please send a note over to sibber@afwerx.af.mil. Misty just posted that in the chat. And please don't be discouraged if your question did not get answered. We had a whole lot of questions and we're hoping to get back to you in the best, most concise way possible. So definitely check out the website for any additional answers, and we'll see you again at the next one. Do we have a slide on here with the next timing of the next event with Jason for whoever's operating the pitch deck, perhaps?
There's not a slide for that, but the next meeting will be December 9th at the same time. You can use the same link that was posted. I'll post it again real quick to register for it.
Perfect.
That's going to be fantastic. The year in review next week. So make sure you jump on and see some of the great work that's being done through the program.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for dialing in. We're officially over time, so I'll release y'all to hopefully go get some lunch and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you all so much. We'll see you on the
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.